On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1968. We're going to be taking a look at Steppenwolf, and they're going to be performing Born to be Wild. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So let's get the guys up on screen and see how they get on. And there we have it. It's also good at the end of the video to have the band members listed, because you don't always see that. But this is one of those performances that is totally live, and I know that there are a lot of videos on YouTube that are either totally mimed and it's just the original recorded version being played over the top and the guys are miming to it, or there's some backing that they're miming and then there is a live vocal from John K. So finding a live version of this song is a rare thing, but we have it here. And there are some interesting elements going on with the live performance that we're hearing compared to that original record. And of course, the thing that really does stick out on that original record is that Hammond B3 and the organ sound that is so high in the mix. And obviously, a lot of people who play the guitar and want to play this riff will just be focusing on that part of it. And I will get the guitar out later just to go through a few things. But having the organ in there, it fills in so much of the sound. And when we go to the verses of this song, listen back to the original record and take notice of that organ, because the way that it comes in so high in the mix, especially with that call and response that we get in the verse, because we get John's vocal and then instantly we get that Hammond B3 that just comes in really high in the mix, and then the guitar riff as well. And that is the response. We get two responses to the original call that is given by John with that verse vocal. Of course, everyone listening to this song is going to be thinking of bikers, and especially the film Easy Rider. It's one of those perfect combinations of a song which was released in 1968 and the movie came out in 1969, so it was already in existence, but it's almost like it was perfect for that movie because of the way that the song feels. And sometimes you get that where a song is put to a movie or put to a film, it might even be a short film, that suits it so well, it just goes hand in hand and will be forever known as being the song from that movie. It certainly was the case with this. The reason that it goes so well with the image of motorbikes and driving forward is because straight off the bat we start this song with a drum fill and then we're straight into the rhythm. So that means that the rhythm for the song is driving forward immediately, and that rhythmic element is the first thing that you're hit with. So it just sets the scene for the song. We do have that brief bit of respite in the chorus where everything drops out and we get the tagline, Born to be Wild, but then we're straight back into that driving forward rhythm with the drums, with the bass, with the guitar riff as well. Interestingly, when we do get into the verses, the guitar, even though there aren't any chords being played, it's muted strums, so we get this chugging effect of driving forward, and then the riff comes in as the response to that verse line that I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, with the mix that we get with this live performance, the organ is right down there in the mix, and it's something that John tries to rectify by going over with his microphone, because even on stage they must have heard that they couldn't really hear the organ, and it's Goldie McJohn playing. Unfortunately, because of that, we're going to get a totally different sound to the record, and it does put a little bit more of a focus on the guitar elements. Just a quick word on John Kay's vocals, because it is one of those voices that just has its own personality, its own sound. He has that rasp in there as well, and just to cover this fact of this song being the first song to have heavy metal as a lyric being used in a song, but it wasn't being used to describe a genre, it was being used to describe the heavy metal thunder, the sound of the motorbikes. But anyway, it does have those words in there for the first time ever. But getting into that vocal delivery, because it's interesting in that John's vocal isn't necessarily that high vocally. We're only hitting a G4 here as the highest note. So it means that he's not up there in the tenor range, which is something that people tend to relate with rock and hard rock and heavy metal vocalists that are hitting high notes. But the most important thing here is it doesn't matter that John isn't hitting high notes, because of the sound and the emotion and the way that he delivers these notes. And this is the thing, that nobody is ever really aware of the notes that are being hit until they go to a piano or they get their guitar out and find what the notes are, because you just appreciate it musically. It's either musically good or it's not, and it doesn't really matter which notes you're hitting. If something is really bad, but the guy's hitting really high notes or attempting to, nobody's ever going to say, oh, well, this sounds really bad, but because he's trying to hit a high C in the tenor range, then it must be good. It never works that way. So a great example here of just singing in your range and keeping all of your tone, all of your control, exactly as John does, because it makes it unique. And John Kay's vocal was one of those that did stand out because you knew when it was him singing. So we're going to dive into the guitar parts of this live performance and how it differs from the record, because we have Michael Monarch here on guitar, and the original riff, we're starting in E, and it's your full bar chord shape here of E, so first finger on the 7th fret of your A string, and then you squash down your 3rd finger from the D string to the G and to the B. So then we have this sound, and the first part of the riff goes all the way across the chords, so we hear that B string like that. Now, this is where things get interesting, because if you haven't got a large hand span and you've got small hands, you're really going to have to stretch in order to play this riff, because that little finger is going from the 11th fret on the D string to the 12th fret. So something that we have mentioned recently on this channel is about having your guitar at the same height when you play live that you have it when it's on your lap. In exactly this kind of situation, I can make that stretch. I haven't got particularly big hands, but in this position, I can make that stretch. So in relation to this video, you'll find, if you listen to it again, that Michael, with that intro, plays the riff, and you don't really hear the second part of the riff. And the second time through, he still doesn't exactly nail it. It's not like a studio take of the guitar. And when we do look at Michael, his guitar is very low. And it might be the case that he's literally just having a problem getting that little finger into that 12th fret, because the further down your guitar is, the more distance you've got to cover around your neck to then be able to stretch. It's going to be a lot more difficult. So we don't have the riff that we do have on the record being played all the way through on this live performance. So having this that riff continues all the way through that intro on the record, and even in the verse, we have this. So that riff is always coming in, but we don't get that on this live version, unfortunately, and it might have just been the case that Michael tried to do it in that opening, the intro, and realized that he couldn't make that switch up to that 12th fret with the little finger. So he then went into playing more rhythm, kind of just. And you'll hear this all the way through this live performance, just little fills being played. Another thing that we have missing out here on the live performance, understandably so, are the lead guitar lines that we have on the original record. And when we're coming out of this riff, we're changing down to a G, and this is where we have the little lead line. So we're going. Those lines that happen on the recording, it's something like that. I'm not sure if those are the exact notes, but you can hear how you have to break out of your rhythm and everything stops, because that driving force of the rhythm has disappeared, and now we're just hearing, and that is it. It's just single notes. So for live performance, you want to try and keep everything as full sounding as possible, especially if there's only one guitar. So that's exactly what we've got in this live performance. So it's actually something that gives you a bit of an insight into what happens in the studio when they're recording the songs and when it's being mixed. Because if you've seen in a studio a guy sitting behind a massive desk and it's got lots of buttons on there and it's got all of your channels which affect the volume of all the instruments, and you would have seen guys pushing things up and pulling them down, and what would have happened when they're mixing this song and mixing down this song, for those guitar parts that come in, the lead guitar on that channel where that lead guitar is, it would have been just pushed up so that it's louder, so you hear it more clearly. So let me give you another example of that, because the producer, when he's sitting at the desk, he's got every instrument that has been played in front of him on a slider. So if he wants the guitar to be a bit louder, he pushes that one up. If he wants it to be quieter, he pulls it down. Exactly the same for the vocals, the bass, the organ. It's now down to the producer to mix the levels and make whichever instrument he thinks needs to be most prominent, most prominent. So, getting into the intro of the song, we have... And you have that bass line, and it's the thing that you always hear in your head when you're playing the riff. The producer has made sure that you hear that bass line louder than everything else. And this is the art of mixing, so that everything the producer wants to be heard just pops its head above the level that everything else is hitting. So it's obviously a very complicated process, but this song and the original record gives you an appreciation of how the guitar, when you hear those lead notes, it pops out. But live, it's not going to pop out because you can't get it to suddenly be louder and suddenly be more quiet because there isn't a guy controlling the volume of your guitar. And if you wanted to try and achieve that live, you'd have to go to another effect on your pedal board that has the sound boosted, and then suddenly unboost it and go back to your original tone within 1 or 2 seconds. So you'd be trying to play games with your feet, trying to turn everything on, trying to turn it off, and it just isn't feasible doing it live, and certainly wouldn't have been in 1968. You just have to set up your tone and then get as good a sound as you can and hope that the guy behind the mixing desk is making everything as close as you can get it. It just so happened, unfortunately, the organ, which is such a massive part of this song, was too low in the mix. Just to mention about the way that we drive forward in the verse, because that's achieved just by lightly resting your hand on the strings, and we get that muted sound. You can also mute it with your right hand using palm muting, just resting on those strings so that when you hit them, you're not getting any notes coming out. If you do push too hard with your left hand, then you'll be fretting notes, pushing the string onto the fretboard, and you don't want to get that sound. You also might want to hold your chord position in place and mute at the same time, because then you can just push down the chord and not have to do any gymnastics with the left hand in order to, and then rush to your position. Just have the chord ready, and then you can just place it down. And this is where we go for the riff. But an interesting video, because we can analyze it from lots of different angles, especially being able to get an appreciation of how the band change an original recording and what they played to then bring it to the live stage, because sometimes things just aren't applicable and you have to make concessions, but also the live sound is all about keeping it full all the time. A lot of bands will just say, we'll miss out that lead part and we'll just put in full chord shapes in order to keep everything moving along and maintain that full sound, which is exactly what Steppenwolf did with this live performance. This is one of those classic songs that everybody knows, and it was only their 3rd single as well, so they really hit the ground running with those early releases. They also had a lot of success with The Pusher, which was also on the movie Easy Rider. Just to mention the rhythm section as well, because in order for this kind of live performance to work, you need that rhythm section to be solid, and we do have Nick St. Nicholas, who's on bass, and Jerry Edmonton on drums, but we did see their names at the end. Just while I'm mentioning credits, this song was written by Mars Bonfire, whose name is Dennis Edmonton, and he's the brother of Jerry, who I just mentioned, drumming in this video, and they were part of the Sparrows, which then turned into Steppenwolf, and then Mars moved away from the band and went solo, so just giving credit as the songwriter. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!